Ambassador John Bolton, how are you, sir?
Hey, Mark. How are you? Glad to be with you.
I'm doing great. How long have I known you? It's been a while, hasn't it?
Over 25 years, maybe, something like that.
Been a little while, and as you look at and by the way, folks, he knows more than foreign policy. This guy is a constitutional expert, too. John, as you look at what's going on in the Senate, I want to get to Iran, believe me, but I want to talk what's going on in the Senate, this president's conduct with his executive orders and so forth. What do you make of all this?
Well, I concur with those who say it's the most lawless presidency we've seen in a long time, maybe ever. His abuse of executive authority, his willingness to try and ignore Congress as an equal branch of government, culminating in what they've done on the filibuster rule in the Senate. But what he's tried to do through his administrative agencies in the executive branch, I'm very, very worried. Today, in fact, in a speech on immigration, he said flat out, if I could do this without having to go through Congress, I would do it. And I think that's what motivates him. I think we've got 3 more years of this.
Do you think he's trying to nullify parts of the Constitution, trying to nullify Congress's role?
Well, I think he couldn't care less about the structure of separation of powers in the Constitution. I think that's been a theme of the left in America for the last 100 years. Some of their most articulate spokesmen, I think of Lloyd Cutler, the prominent Washington lawyer, called for a parliamentary system in this country. That's what they want. They think if they can win a majority, then the new prime minister can pretty much do what he wants, and these out-of-date constitutional restrictions could just be ignored.
Now, John Bolton, this whole Iran thing, the way it came about, done in the shadows, announced on a Saturday, this is very, very odd, too. What's going on here?
Well, I think this is the worst agreement that an American president has signed in a long, long time. This really is a surrender of fundamental American interest. It endangers our friends and allies like Israel and the Middle East, and it tells would-be proliferators around the world, if you only have enough determination, you too will be able to get nuclear weapons. I think this is one of the most dangerous periods we've seen in American history since the height of the Cold War, and I think Obama truly believes that negotiating with Iran can talk them out of their 25-year-long objective of getting deliverable nuclear weapons. It's about as frightening a misreading of that regime as you can imagine.
So what does Israel do in the face of all this?
Well, I think one of the principal motivating factors for Obama was that this deal would put more pressure on the government of Prime Minister Netanyahu not to use military force against Iran's nuclear weapons program. I think Obama fears an Israeli strike more than he fears an Iranian nuclear weapon, and he intends to use all of the force of international opinion he can muster to pressure the Israelis to sit still. I think the net of this agreement is Iran will get nuclear weapons with only one possible exception, and that is if Israel uses military force. I think if Israel were to do that, it would be an exercise of its legitimate right of self-defense. You don't have to wait to get struck by nuclear weapons before you can defend yourselves, and I think if Israel did decide to strike, America should stand with Israel, resupply it, protect it politically in the United Nations, and do whatever we could to come to their aid.
But I'm not sure Obama would.
He won't. He won't on his own. But I think the overwhelming majority of the American people, I think there are polls out there that show this, would support an Israeli strike and would insist that before we allow Israel to suffer retaliation at the hands of Hezbollah or Hamas or Iran itself, that we assist Israel in any way we could. Obviously, everybody would prefer a peaceful solution. That possibility disappeared 10 or 15 years ago. So we're down to 2 alternatives now. 1, Iran gets nuclear weapons, or 2, Israel strikes. And as bad as the second alternative is, it is far superior to the first.
Do you think, I don't know if you know, but do you think Israel has the weaponry to do what needs to be done in a first, second, third wave of attacks?
Yes, I think they do. I think it's at the outer limit of their capacity. I think that's why most Israeli strategists would prefer the United States do it, because we would really do it the right way. But I think they also understand there is zero chance Obama will use military force. That's one reason the Iranians were able to take him to the cleaners at the bargaining table, because they knew there was no lead in his pencil when he came to the threat of saying all options are on the table. So what Israel could do would be to set the program back 2, 3, maybe 5 years. And if we had a real president in the White House, that would be enough to accomplish regime change in Iran, which ultimately is the only way to end the threat that this current regime poses for us, and has since it took over in 1979.
Do you think, well, there are reports now that the Saudis and the Israelis are working fairly closely together. Do you believe that?
I think there's certainly some level of cooperation, and maybe much deeper than we know. I used to joke, but I don't think it's a joke anymore. I used to say, if the Israelis told the Saudis they wanted to use their airspace to get to Iran to go after the nuclear weapons program, that the Saudis would light flares in the desert that said, Iran this way.
Mm-hmm. And now look at Egypt. Egypt is now making arrangements with Russia because we've essentially cut them off because the military overthrew the Muslim Brotherhood, which I was quite pleased about myself.
Yeah, look, we have not been in this poor a position in the Middle East since Anwar Sadat expelled the Soviet advisors in the early 1970s and invited the United States back in. We have created a power vacuum by our feckless policy all across the region, nowhere better demonstrated than how we've mistreated both Israel and Egypt. And in Egypt, at least, the military is just not going to sit by. They've opened their doors to the purchase of Russian weapons, which hasn't happened in over 30 years. And the Russians are going to take full advantage of it. They see that the United States has lost the ability or the interest to protect its interests in the region, and they are more than happy to get in there and exploit this vulnerability.
And very few people talk about Turkey. Turkey's going fundamentalist. They're part of NATO, and we don't seem to give a damn. We just seem to play along.
It's even worse than that. If it's possible, the Prime Minister Erdogan of Turkey is often cited as Barack Obama's best friend among foreign leaders, maybe his only friend. And you're exactly right. The secular constitution of post-Ottoman Turkey, which the famous Kemal Ataturk put in place, is being systematically dismantled by Erdogan. He's putting Islamicists into the military, into the courts, and he's really taking Turkey away from the West. He's reversing a 100-year-long process. I don't think this is going to happen without more opposition, but he's a very determined leader, and it's not a moderate course he's on. He once said, before becoming prime minister, democracy is like a streetcar. You ride it to the stop you want, and then you get off.
It is amazing. And Obama must think the same way.
Well, given these statements about ruling without legislation, it certainly sounds like it.
I don't remember a president constantly talking about ruling without Congress. I mean, to me, it's just stunning. And there's a pattern to this, and people just they take it in stride. I don't take it in stride in the least. Let me ask you this. So let's keep moving here. We have now China. China has just basically said, we're taking over a big chunk of the China Sea, and you're going to fly your planes in here. You report to us. They see weakness, don't they? So they're moving now.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. This announcement that they would control the airspace over a disputed chain of islands, disputed with Japan in the East China Sea, is the most brazen expansion of Chinese power, really in over 100 years. And it's not just in the East China Sea. They have taken steps that would make the South China Sea, everything between Vietnam and the Philippines, they would take that from being international waters, in effect, and make it a Chinese lake. And when you look at the sea lanes of communication and trade that pass through there and through the East China Sea, this is critical to South Korea, Taiwan, Japan, the countries of Southeast Asia. And they see that the United States is essentially not paying any attention, not able to stand up to this assertion of Chinese power and the Blue Water Navy that the Chinese are building for the first time literally in 600 years. So you're exactly right, and I think it's a pattern. We've seen it in the Middle East. We see it with Russia, with China. We see it all over the world. Our adversaries see a weak, inattentive president. They've calibrated their policies accordingly. So the scope and the pace of threats to the United States, I think, is going to pick up dramatically in the next 3 years.
And at the same time, we're hollowing out our military, and especially the Navy, right?
Yeah, if you look at the paths of the budgets of all federal agencies on Obama, all of the civilian agencies have gone straight up, and the military, in effect, has gone right downhill. It's not just the sequester, although that's had a significant effect. It's the $1 trillion plus in budget cuts, X the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan, now not taking them into account, but deep cuts into our military programs that have resulted in weapon systems not being purchased, troops not being trained adequately, overstrained in the way we've been using them. And I just think our military planners look at contingency after contingency around the world and recognize we just can't handle it at present budget levels.
What do you make of the firing or the removal of these top military personnel, one general after another, and it's being done it's almost regularized now. I've never seen anything like this.
No, I don't think there's precedent for it in what is still essentially a peacetime military. I have no trouble with the president firing generals. I think one of the problems that we've had in the past, I would say it was true in the Bush administration, was that incompetent commanders were not removed quickly enough. But what's going on here, the phenomenon you've identified, is not incompetence being removed. It's people who have a different view of the U.S. role in the world being removed to get a more political type of general, one that knows the direction the White House wants to go in, and is politically compliant, not necessarily on military issues, but more on social and other ideological issues. And that's going to have a profound effect on the military over time as well.
The next conservative president, hopefully we'll have one soon, is going to have a hell of a time rebuilding our society in many ways, isn't he or she?
Yeah, and I think that's why we have to recognize that we need a strong American economy at home. We need the government out of our off our backs, out of our pockets. We need America's economy to have a chance to revive so we can have a strong presence around the world. The strength of our economy is directly linked to our ability to maintain some minimal amount of stability and order in the world. And we can't do that unless we have a strong economy at home. So I think you need a Ronald Reagan-style president who sees that American strength is a benign force in the world. It's a force for peace. It's a force that allows us to improve our standard of living and protect freedom here at home. And I don't think you can just say, all right, we're going to turn our backs on the rest of the world and expect America to be strong at home any more than it would be strong abroad.
But what of our constitutional system? We now have a president who keeps pushing the edge of the envelope further and further and further. He creates precedent for future presidents who might be of a similar mindset. He's now going to stack the courts, particularly the D.C. Circuit, but as many circuits as he can, with these radical leftists out of law schools and so forth. I mean, it's hard to recover from this, isn't it?
Well, it is hard to recover, and I think what it tells conservatives is there is no substitute for winning elections. There are no cute tricks. There's the sequester mechanism, just as one example. You can't fake your way into getting the right kinds of policies, and we may regard it as burdensome to have to go out and campaign and fight election after election, but that's the way the left has won. They wear us down. They count on us being tired out. I mean, I think one of the tributes to the Tea Party and conservatives around the country is the way we have stood up to Obamacare. They calculated that if they could just get it enacted, we'd give up. That would become the law of the land, as they used to tell us before they decided to change the law of the land to suit their own purposes. And I think it is the climactic struggle of a domestic American policy. Even Margaret Thatcher, as Prime Minister of Great Britain, couldn't reverse the socialized national health system they had in that country because it had been in place too long even for her. If we lose this fight, that's the position we're going to be in. So I say it may be the law of the land today, but it's never going to be the law of the land forever if we persist. I think that's an attitude we've got to carry across the whole range of political struggles. We've got to spend more time and effort getting conservatives elected to office, because otherwise we will be overwhelmed.
Yeah, well, this is part of the problem, the battle with this Republican establishment, and there is a Republican establishment. You and I have fought the Republican establishment many times, and there is this battle going on, and, there's a lot of battles that have to be won, because if you're just going to get a Republicans elected who say something and then basically lie down, that's not very helpful.
No, and I think what we've seen in so many cases here, just take the past month, everything that was predicted about Obamacare so far has come true, and if anything, it's been worse even than some of the direst predictions. So we are really at an absolutely critical point here. This is the last moment to give up on it. This is to keep explaining to the American people that the tendency of the left over the last 100 years, which is we know better than you how to live your own lives, and if you just do what we tell you to do, everybody would be better off. If we lose this battle, we're just going to see it repeated over and over again.
All right, my friend. Happy Thanksgiving. We appreciate it.
Happy Thanksgiving to you, Mark. Glad to be with you.
All right. God bless. Good guy. He's been a good guy for a quarter of a century. I've known him.